everybody. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. My name is Bex. I'm the events coordinator here at Books Are Magic, and we are just positively over the moon to have you all here with Zefyr Lisowski and Harron Walker to celebrate Uncanny Valley Girls. I just have a few housekeeping notes to go over before we get started. After the talk tonight, we'll be doing a hand raised Q&A, so think of your questions. Not your stories, just your questions. Hold on tight, we'll get them answered. Stories are for the signing line, which will be happening after the event. We'll let you know when and where to line up for that. You have all done a really great job. We are almost sold out of books. Which is very exciting because we ordered a lot of them. So there are still some left to buy after the event, and you can also pre-order through us to get more copies. I will bother Zefyr to come sign them. And if you're listening to the live stream, you can buy copies at the link in the description. And those are those. And the book you'll be buying tonight, we're also excited for this collection. It is a sharply personal and expansive essay collection dedicated to the strange and absurd beauty of horror films, exploring the complications of gender, the insidiousness of class ascension, and the latent violence hidden in our own uncanny reflections. Star of tonight's show. Yes. Star of tonight's show, Zefyr Lisowski is a trans and queer writer, artist, and North Carolinian living in New York, a 2023 NYFA/NYSCA Fellow and 2023 Queer Art Fellow. She is the author of the poetry collections Girl Work and Blood Box, which Blood Box we have copies of. And you should also definitely get that. It's so cool. And that's the only spoiler I'll give. Zefyr's work has appeared in many journals from 2016 to 2014. She served as poetry co-editor for the Whiting Award-winning Apogee Journal, and she's seen Grave Robbers twice. A conversation extraordinaire and dear friend of the store, Harron Walker is a writer who lives in Brooklyn, and whose work has appeared in New York, Dazed, and other publications. She's the author of the essay collection Aggregated Discontent, which we also have here tonight for you to purchase. One of my lovely coworkers who checked you in, it's one of her favorite books of the year. And we read a lot of books, so that's our job, so we should know. So you should buy that one too. And also, the author, Harron is also the author of the forthcoming novella, Veronica Place, out next year from Tiger Bee Press. Without any further ado, please join me in the warmest welcome to Zefyr and Harron.
Hey Zefyr,
What's up, Harron?
how are you?
I'm so excited to be here.
That's
Thank you so
crazy, me
much.
too.
Yeah. Incredible. We were thinking of me reading for a couple minutes and then sort of going into the hot mic portion of the evening.
Yeah, if you don't, I just insist,
Okay, of course. All right. I'm going to read a couple of pages from Uncanny Valley Girls. I'm going to read from the opening. This is a book about horror, survival, intimacy, and love. I'll just get into things. Preparing to enter the psych ward, my nerves swelled, and all I could think about was you. The you who broke up with me a week ago, the you who I would break up with in 7 months, and the you who would visit me 2 months later. My body ached for you, like the surgeon's hand aches for the scalpel, like the butcher knife aches for meat. In the selfie I took then, my eyes were red from crying. To distract myself, I watched Scream on my laptop in the emergency room as I waited to be admitted. It was my go-to comfort movie. At a time when I couldn't feel further from it, it reminded me of home. Throughout the whole period of my confinement, Scream and movies like it were how I rerouted my fear into something more manageable. Whenever I'd stare into my reflection in the shatterproof mirror bolted to the wall, I'd tell myself I was scared of a hunting knife piercing through my aorta, not the murkier dangers I feared lurking within myself. Whenever I'd drink to calm my nerves, the water was the warmth and thickness of blood. This is a book about horror, real and filmic, which means it must also be a book about love. For those of us who live in power's periphery, trans, disabled, non-white, poor, love happens under violence's shadow. But love also happens despite these violences, not through them. A love preceded and succeeded by separate horrors is no less a love. In fact, you have to have love to begin with in order to fear it being taken away. So when I talk about horror and about love, I can't not talk about the hurt, or the rapes, or the deaths, or the moments quivering and dripping blood before I entered the ward. I can't not talk about the way the scary movies I saw shaped me, and how I bent that shape until it became something new and gleaming. These movies, their alternate hatred and empathy, their pathologized and victimized women, their strength, resonated with me even from a young age, and the fact of that uneasy allegiance scared and nauseated me. I experienced things I couldn't control while watching scary movies, and in the tightening of my chest, I felt even more open to the lives these films depicted. Lives like my own. To watch a scary movie, after all, is to surrender yourself to the impulses of your body, the extremity of shock or fear overriding all other emotions. Through this surrendering, I believe, you open yourself to other experiences more complicated. Learn to name the quieter desires, peeking through the rough shawl of fear. Besides, repulsion, one of the foremost responses to horror, is mainly a mark of recognition. I see myself in this, and I'm scared. And I also believe anything you can see yourself in so intimately can be turned into a kind of care. People, even people who have not been broken, if such a thing exists, love horror films. People love horror increasingly more every year, in fact. Between 2012 and 2021, scary movies went from taking up about 2% of the annual American box office to 13. There's a well-worn pop science explanation for this rise. Scary movies, we're told, serve as a controlled release for people craving adrenaline, the same as roller coasters. The increase in horror's popularity, the argument goes, speaks to the increased need to relieve stress. The genre, scholars say, thrills without frightening. Horror movies conjure fear without the danger, quote, concurrent to fear, and in this way present an escape from the quotidian struggles of the viewers' lives. Horror shows lives unlike our own, and this is where it gets its strength. To make this argument, however, is to falsely attest that the lives in horror films are unlike our own, and I learned to love through the ways I saw myself reflected, not pushed away. Despite the ghosts or curses or spree killings, scary movies are ultimately about the weight of violence on a life. They're about the ways to keep living despite a whole world that wants you dead, and the legacy of that survival, the parts of you that have given up on surviving. They're about moving or failing to move toward care, despite being irreconcilably hurt. But they aren't escapist, at least not for me. Like Scream, they showed me the possibility of a place filled with beauty and pain in equal measure. They showed me how to identify a hurt before I even knew how to name my own. Thank you.
I love that line, and I was gonna call it out later, so I have it right here at the on that first page about like my body ached for you, like the line about the scalpel and the butcher knife and the meat. She's a really good writer, everyone. I don't know if you know this. I wanted to start out with something a little. Let me know if it's too hard hitting. A classic game of like fuck, marry, kill.
Yeah.
With like the horror movie icons, given the through line and everything. So the first round I wanted to call Face Edition. We have Scream, Ghostface, famously called Scream among friends, Leatherface, and the French lady with the bob from Eyes Without a Face.
Gosh.
I know, it's really hard.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting this degree of journalistic rigor.
I gotta do it. I had to do it.
Okay, obviously you have to marry Leatherface. He's like wifed up throughout the whole movie. I guess I'd probably fuck the woman from Eyes Without a Face, because despite years of insisting on my own bisexuality, I am fundamentally lesbian. And I would, I guess, kill Ghostface. But there are so many of them. Which one would you kill?
Oh God.
Like 12 ghost faces.
I mean, there has to be a sequel, so
Yeah.
you'll solve that in the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Round 2, Wolfman edition. You have fuck, marry, kill, Wolfman, cis, Wolfman, trans, Wolfman, misgendered trans woman.
Okay. I'd fuck. I feel like this is really treacherous territory.
Yeah. No, I'm like, you can't kill all three. You know, there's
Yeah,
only two
I'm
options
just
for
trying
kill.
to get rid of them all.
Yeah.
Okay, I
Tanked her career in one night. Saying, kill the trans woman.
just.
Yeah.
Sorry, what if I said that though? What if I was like, I killed a trans woman?
She doesn't play by any rules.
No.
Never let him know your next move.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I'd marry the misgender trans woman, and I'd give her a place of like safety and security that she doesn't get from the outside world. Thank you. I'm an ally to the misgender trans woman community. I would.
Thank you.
I would kill the cis wolfman, the wolfman, and I guess I would fuck the. What was the third one? I was so fixated on the misgender trans woman.
Wolfman trans
Yeah, sure.
guy edition.
Okay, yeah.
Very trans men now. It's crazy.
Whoa.
Yeah.
New tender just dropped.
I know. Thank God. Okay, but seriously, everyone, can we give it up for Zefyr one more time? Imagine if that was the end of the event. It's not. Your book is so good. It's like conceptually, it's so interesting with how you're writing about the horror movies and also like IRL violence and how like there's this self-feeding loop of like narratives perpetuated by one reinforcing the reality of them in the other. And but I also like love the book at the level of the line. Like I said, that one line about my body ached for you, like the surgeon's hand aches for the scalpel is like gorgeous. She was a fucking poet, everyone. Even when she's technically writing in prose. And also it's like sometimes unthinkably funny, like the line about your you got the like pen in the margins, LMAO, for the line about your first girlfriend, and you were like, she was a Republican, we had nothing in common except both being 16. Like that really got me on the subway that day. I also just like really love the way that you are like writing about yourself from the first person perspective, personal experiences, without also giving into what might be like this like knee-jerk impulse to like apologize for the fact of like centering yourself in your own writing, or castigating yourself on the page, despite the fact that you have taken on this project. And at the same time, you're still like contextualizing your own experiences of like love, community, care, and violence within like broader contexts of all of those things, even when they don't like center you specifically. I think it's like really masterfully done. And I wanted to ask you like how you, in writing this book, approached writing about yourself while also writing about yourself in the context in which we all live.
Well, firstly, thank you so much for all the praise about the book. That really means so much to me. I think that in terms of sort of writing about myself while also thinking expansively, I thankfully had a lot of models for this. I think that there's a tremendous tradition, especially coming from feminist small press literature of the 1970s and 80s and moving onward, of writing that centers the self, that thinks about it politically as well. Audre Lorde's an obvious answer. Dorothy Allison's work, prose poetry, fiction and nonfiction alike, does that, I think, really exceptionally well. And these writers were figures who were really significant to me, but also, especially when I was selling the book, we were kind of existing in this like mini boom of the personal essay that has like produced a bunch of really tremendous works. I think Larissa Pham's Pop Song.
Love that.
It's such a good book. Joanna
One of the greatest like Tumblr referendums I've ever read.
Absolutely. Yeah. Joanna Hedva's How to Tell When We Will Die, which came out this year, but was like a long time in the making, is another such book. But I think as I was writing it, the fact that there were other writers who had attempted this hybridization before actually kind of emboldened me to think about myself outside of myself as well, right? Especially as a trans woman, the like impetus to think of yourself as a siloed entity, right? As someone on a pedestal alone is a really pervasive one and a really seductive one. And it was really important for me throughout every time that I used the personal pronoun to think more about what are the ways this can also encompass a we, and what are the ways this can relate more just to not just to myself, but to the communities of which I'm fortunate enough to be a part of as well.
I am I did think you were the first trans woman to ever write a book, so this is news to me. But it looks like I got some reading to do. I also wanted to talk about, like, in terms of how you approached writing this book, as a book of essays, as a book of nonfiction prose. Your previous public, you have written, first person essays before in esteemed literary journals and esteemed literary websites. But your like full length published works have thus far been works of poetry, Blood Box. There's was it Werewolf Inventory? Is that
Wolf Inventory.
Wolf
It's like a
Inventory.
really early one. Yeah.
Well, you wrote about it in the book, spoiler alert. But and then Girl Work, of course, which also congratulations to Zefyr for winning the Lammy. Had to sneak that in. So what I there is a world in which I can envision Uncanny Valley Girls as a poetry collection. And I'm curious, like, what made you decide, like, the story and the narratives you wanted to tell or explore would best be served through the form of the essay?
Yeah, that's also a really great question. I think that essays have poems are like weird, fluid, complicated things as well, which is part of what I really love about them. But there's also a way in which essays kind of can sort of veer into these registers of directness and direct address with a little bit less distance than you get with a lot of lyric poetry often, which is kind of mediated through this lyric eye. It's mediated through this sense of self that's very sort of just like flowing and concerned with like the rhythm of the line, which I'm still concerned with in this book. But partly it was just thinking of what are the ways in which I can talk in this more sort of uncumbered fashion to an audience. What are the ways in which I can sort of modulate the audience outside of poetry, which at its worst can sometimes feel a little bit like an echo chamber, but at its best is really sort of building a community in and of itself. I guess a lot of what I was trying to do with this book was take a lot of the community building that I see in poetry in really exciting and positively activating ways, and think about what does it mean to try and encompass that community, that sense of community, with a work that perhaps is a little bit more wide reaching, or like perhaps because of its wide reach is able to allow more subterfuge in who I'm talking to, who I'm not talking to, who I'm secretly talking to. Like, where's the misgendered werewolf in this, you know?
She's holding the book like, I love this book.
She's waiting in the signing line.
She's here tonight. Welcome her. She like walks out behind that saloon door over there. Oh, that would have been great. I should have gotten that costume rental. Anyway, speaking of like being understood or misunderstood, you do write about the experience with Blood Box, the poetry chapbook about the Lizzie Borden murders and familial violence, as being something that like the meaning you found in terms of its reception kind of like went over a lot of people's heads. And also with that previous chapbook, Wolf Inventory, you quote someone, a review that was just completely like missed it entirely, where they were like, wow, what a great book cataloging how werewolves are predators. And you were like, not exactly, not quite the nuanced meaning you were intending. Is that something, given the fact that like an essay collection, I think as a form almost will often like demand more clarity or directness sometimes in terms of storytelling than poetry might necessarily from the author. Is that sense of being, do you think that the meaning of this book can be just as easily misunderstood as those previous ones?
I didn't think about this in terms of like my historical trajectory of being misunderstood. But now I have something to reflect on for the rest of my life.
There's a great Pink album co-written by Linda Perry called Misunderstood.
One of my favorite albums as a kid, actually.
Wow, I'm so surprised. Yeah. You love an album, go out. This is all such shocking information given what we just talked about.
I mean, the title track is really singular, which is of course titled Misunderstood.
Yeah. Something spoke to me as a 13-year-old, like, oh,
yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I think that, sorry, what was the question?
Do you feel like this work right here, when you were writing it, was there any impulse towards, I guess, avoiding such misunderstanding in writing the essays?
Yeah, I think there's a directness to essays, definitely. And I think I was interested in that. And I think there are a couple of specific things that I was kind of on my high horse with this book about as well. I think that one of the sort of popular misconceptions of horror is that you watch it and you like either identify with the survivor being like, oh, I've survived things. I like this person who survived things. Or you identify with the monster being like, oh, I've like experienced hatred or misunderstanding. Therefore, I identify with this person who's cast as a villain. And to me, especially that second sort of framework, kind of inverting the terms of power, I find really underwhelming and really frustrating, honestly, because I think one of the things that's the most exciting to me about scary movies and about this larger context that we find ourselves in is the way that through identifications with people who do harm, we are able to understand the ways we ourselves do harm as well. And through writing this essay collection, I think that was one of the main things that I was trying to just drive home, thinking through what are the ways in which, as humans, we hurt each other and continue moving through that. What are the ways we have been hurt? And instead of falling into, let's say, like, I grew up Catholic, right? Instead of falling into like the kind of Christo supremacist, like turn the other cheek kind of attitude, what are the ways in which we can actually think about harm done and received in a more complicated way? And the essay, because of its kind of directness, seemed a way to tackle that.
I think it's like kind of fair to say there are a few parts in the book where you kind of engage with a specific kind of potential source of harm for someone reading the book, in terms of writing about real people who you may or may not still have some form of relationship with. You write at one point that you acknowledge directly there's like an inherent unfairness to this, but it's also your story to tell. You also, almost everyone in the book seems to be like pseudonymous, so it's not like you're just like out here like posting, doxing everyone page to page.
Yeah, there's only one non-synonymous person in the book, is audience member Siobhan Biles.
I was reading, I was like, I wonder if Siobhan is Siobhan.
Yeah.
I don't know. But there's like another part you in an essay on werewolves and ginger snaps and sexual violence. You write about two people who have harmed you in the past who, like after the fact, also like transitioned and are also trans women, and that there's this like sort of empathy you directly write about like you, I guess, like hold empathy for like the possibility of shared pain from shared experiences you all might have had. At the same time, it doesn't like the fact of them also being trans doesn't like negate your own experience, and that it's maybe would have been easier or simpler for you to not even like work that into your narrative about sexual violence, but that you seem drawn to complicating the narrative, muddying the narrative, allowing it to just be however complicated it is. I guess like I'm curious like what kind of considerations you make when you were writing something involving real people, however directly or indirectly they appear on the page.
Yeah, it's something that I thought about a lot. I tried to acknowledge the ways in which I am a biased reporter throughout the book, acknowledging my own perspective, which was also something that was really helpful in terms of its framing in the comments I got from my editor, Ezra Kapoor, who's been a really brilliant sort of steward of the text. But as I was writing this, it was really important for me to try not to sanitize either my own or other people's actions, even if I'm talking about those who exist in whatever sort of margins we want to think about. And I think part of the reason why that was important to me is similar to my kind of horror movie take. I think the response to rampant demonization, which like it's no stretch of the imagination to say has been accelerating for trans people in the past couple of years, kind of precipitously scarily. The response to that isn't to present ourselves as angels who are sort of held to a moral standard that no human being can hold to, but to actually think through the complexities of our own lives. And actually, by rendering that compassionately, we can serve as hopefully somewhat of a counterballast to the kind of marginalization and like hatred that's being spewed.
Mhm.
And that's something that's only become more evident and more important to me during this book's road to publication.
I mean, like, people are going to tell whatever stories about us that they want, but we might as well just tell the stories we want to tell the way that we want to tell them. I sort of like related to that. In that same essay, you write something that I think speaks to this much more subtly ingrained abolitionist framework that kind of exists throughout the book, that is kind of melded into one with so many other narrative through lines, where you write something about how people should be allowed to change for whatever reasons possible. It's in the changing that we get a chance to live. And I think more directly, like on the surface, you're writing in that passage about transness and werewolves as this metaphor that you see for trans women in the movie Ginger Snaps. But I thought that also worked so much into a way to understand like non-carceral sort of methods of accountability, and also just a framework to understand the inherent violence of like living in the world. And the overall thrust of the book, that it's like the fact that you may be wounded shouldn't negate like the value of your survival, wounded or not. And I know we weren't supposed to do comments, not questions, but I guess that was more of a comment, not a question. I thought that was fab. In terms of more of a question, though, I was wondering, like, did like completing the book change your did it affect your thinking, whether in the realm of like politics, or how you think about your relationship to yourself, your relationship to any of the movies you write about, your relationship to Siobhan, wherever she is?
I didn't realize this is going to be such a Siobhan-centric Q&A. But yeah, I mean, I think like writing this book like profoundly changed things. I think the like most kind of facile point of change, right, is it's very much a book about dating, right? It's a book about exes. It's a book about relationality. I finished the book. I sort of turned in the final draft, and then I like made the decision to just like completely stop dating for like 8 months. Yeah, I know, it's spooky.
It makes sense, but wow.
No, for sure. But I think having this sort of archive, thinking through sort of relationality, was like really helpful in terms of just thinking through. I mean, so much of the book is like how we show up for others, how we don't show up for others. And I think having this record of it has kind of caused me to both reevaluate the relationality that I enter into and the ways I show up in ways that's really surprising. In terms of other things, I mean, I was fortunate enough to kind of fall in with like anarchist organizing and anarchist political thought when I was like very young. I sort of discovered it at like 16, 17, 18, which I don't really talk about in the book, but I'm glad that you point out the kind of abolitionist through line that runs through it.
Which I don't think you ever explicitly like name it as such. I just like will see like random passages whilst I'm reading, and I'm just like, oh, that like damn, she's a good writer. This is so multi-layered.
Well, if you read the first word of every chapter, it spells out the Communist Manifesto.
Okay, I had a suspicion, and this is why you go to in-person events.
But I mean, as writing it, all that's to say, it just kind of solidified my political commitments, right? The way in which I'm committed to thinking about things in a non-carceral manner, the way I'm committed to like showing up across spectrums of identity, across spectrums of relationality, across spectrums of solidarity, right? It feels like I have this book out in the world, and now I kind of have to live by it for better and for better.
I love that set of options. Like, last question I wanted to ask you is also about werewolves. I heard a little birdie told me, the little birdie being you on multiple occasions in public at readings on a microphone, that you wrote a novel about lesbian werewolves. And wait, are they lesbians?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, one of them's bisexual, but you know, I was bisexual.
That was fucked up of me. Thank you for calling
exactly.
me in.
Erasure. It's actually a novel about werewolf erasure.
Okay, fab. I need to read it apparently. So, do you want to tell everyone about that?
Yeah, it's a novel about lesbian werewolves. The way I've been talking about it is it's a book thinking about questions of like kink and codependence and sociality and self-hatred, but mainly it's a trans lesbian erotic body horror werewolf novel because I want there to be something relatable about it as well.
Just like strumming my pain with your fingers on the page, too. I guess that's all for us. Anything else you want to tell your beloved readers at this sold out event at Books of Magic?
I mean, I thank you so much. If for those of you who haven't read Aggregated Discontent, it's such a brilliant essay collection. Please track down a copy of it, which they do have here as well. So you can maybe get 2 signatures, 1 event, which is a bargain if you ask me.
Thank you. Everyone get up for Zefyr. And now we turn the tables onto all of you. Hi. Do you have a question for Zefyr?
I do. Well, first of all, I want to say that I got to read some of like the very first draft. Did I read the first draft? I don't know.
Yeah, I was writing it at the residency. We were
Yes.
about that.
Yes, I read the first draft, so I'm really special, and and the book is amazing. I can say with confidence. But my question is, you know, because I have this sort of love-hate thing that I've talked to you about with horror, where it's like you kind of love the fear, but you hate the fear. And like it can feel cathartic, but it can also feel like paralyzing or like, I don't know. I guess I'm trying to word what the actual question is, but I'm wondering how you explore that space of like, I think also related to trauma when it feels like it's helping you move through it, but or it's helping you, or it's the opposite where you're kind of frozen because of the violence and I don't know.
I guess let me know. Throw a tomato if I get this. Like I have to repeat the question for the people live streaming. So, how do you approach writing about films that you love, even if you also might hate aspects of them, even if they might be triggering, might be difficult to watch? How do you engage with those films on the page? Is that an all right way to summarize?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of different answers that I can give to that. I think first is a lot of this book is kind of reevaluating plot in real time. So the most notable example of that is an essay that's about the movie Black Swan, which at the time I was like, haha, this rocks. And then I watched it later. I was like, haha, this sucks. And I think that finding ways to chart what kind of is rubbing me the wrong way or what I'm like fascinated by or what is I'm fascinated by because it rubs me the wrong way is something that I try to do throughout the book. But also, I think that I'm someone who scares very easily. Part of the reason this book is about relationships is because I can't watch a scary movie alone by and large. I like need someone else there because I'm just like shrieking. But I've been thinking a lot about the philosopher Agvi Sakadipolo, who has this concept called traumatophilia, right? And the concept is like finding ways of, and I'm like really aggressively paraphrasing, but finding this kind of like strength in what traumatizes you as a way to work through existing trauma. And to me, horror becomes this really great space of release to think through violences done and received, like I said, in this kind of more encompassing way that builds a container for it, right? Like maybe I can't revisit X event that scared me in real life, but I can watch a kid eat a knife and bring her back, which is a sick movie, by the way, in both senses of that word.
Wait, is that the sequel to the one with the hand?
It seems like it's a sequel because it's the same directors and
Okay.
it follows
Talk to
the
me.
same-
That was
yeah,
it. Yeah.
exactly. It
I was like, they
follows-
keep going like this.
Yeah, exactly. It follows the same iams, to use a poetry term, but they're separate entities.
She's a poet.
She's a poet.
Yeah. Is there another question? What's your question?
On the topic of watching movies, because that's part of the book, in the reading that you shared today, you were quoting your own work around watching Scream on your phone in the hospital, and And I just wanted to know what would be your fantasy way to watch a horror movie? Like, what's your ideal horror movie watching scenario if you could pick every single part of it?
So what is your ideal way of watching a horror movie?
Okay, I'm going to also two responses to that. First answer is with loved ones or friends in a intimate environment under a blanket, probably with some sort of snack. I love a sour gummy worm, personally. But failing that, I love a movie in theaters, also surrounded by people I care about, which is an opportunity to tell y'all on this Saturday. I am introducing a screening of Texas Chainsaw Massacre at Nighthawk Williamsburg at 11 a.m., which is kind of the perfect time to watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre because it's a brunch time screening and it's a movie about meat. So really 4 meats content here. There's still a couple of tickets available.
Just always wait. What was it like? ABBI. Always be brand influencing. I don't know. Gorgeous. Any other questions? Hey.
Hi. Hi, Zefyr.
Hi.
I know you finished this book a while ago. I'm wondering if there's any horror movies that have come out since that you would have loved to include, and I'm curious what they are and what you might have written about them.
That's a really great question. There is, I think, Bring Her Back, which is a movie where a kid eats a knife, is really, really singular. I think it does some interesting things around like the sort of violences in the foster care system and the sort of ways in which grief can make you completely unsympathetic. And the thorniness of its portrayal of that I found really affecting. And so much of this book is kind of living in the shadow of various griefs. So that's something that I would be interested in talking about. It's also a little bit older, but around New Year's, I watched this 2002 French film, In My Skin, which some of my friends know I've been like sort of yammering about incessantly, which is this movie about a woman who accidentally cuts her leg open at a party, and then one thing leads to the next, and then she becomes an autoerotic cannibal. And I think that I'm really fascinated by it, right? It's like really sensual, and I'm totally veering this off topic right now. Part of what I'm so interested by in this movie is this interview the filmmaker gave in 2018, where they were like, how are you able to come up with this idea of someone who eats their skin erotically and then sort of develops an addiction to it? How are you able to come up with this metaphor? And she just says point blank in the interview, this isn't a metaphor. I did this for years and I made the movie so I could stop. Which to me is like the most fascinating and scientific creative process imaginable, right? So like thinking about what it means to make something reflecting existing pain and reflecting a complicated relationship to the self as a way to normalize that relationship is both really affecting and like kind of sad in like a number of surprising and unsurprising ways. So those two movies, I'd say.
Sorry, and for everyone streaming, Sloan asked a great question about movies that have come out in the last couple of years since you finished the manuscript that you wished you could have written about. Any other questions? I sort of halfway back.
Hi. So we've just heard that you've moved through poetry, essay collection, novel. Would you ever go to screenwriting and write a horror movie yourself?
The question is, would you ever go transition to screenwriting and actually write a horror movie yourself?
I mean, who doesn't want to move to Los Angeles? But I'll leave it at that.
Any other? Over in the back.
Hi. So I only got my copy last night, so I only read the first essay. That's what my question is about. But I really loved the like the through line about like disability and closeness to death as the source of horror. And there was a line in particular, you said medical transition like disability is viewed by the mainstream as a sensational departure from normalcy. Okay, sorry. This is like a multi-part thing. But when I was reading this argument, I was thinking of like what's the counterpoint, and I thought of Hellraiser, where like the Cenobites, their horror is not coming from their debility, but the fact that they chose it, and sort of that like they have altered and in some cases like disabled themselves by removing senses or whatever else it is, in search of like that sensation. And I guess my question is, like, do you think sometimes that, because you described The Ring and you described Zelda from Pet Sematary, which I actually remember watching that movie. That was the scariest part for me, for sure. And do you think there's like types, like tropes in horror that are like more a horror that someone would choose the thing, rather than that the thing has happened to them?
So the question had to do inquiring as to Zephyr's thoughts, building off of a lot of the writing you did about horror's depiction of disability, oftentimes being like a go-to way of like trying to find the fear in its narrative is just sometimes simply like incorporating disability into the plot, and specifically the question of, do you have any thoughts on if in your estimation in horror movies, does the horror sometimes come, say, in its depiction of disability from someone like the Cenobites in Hellraiser, who maybe chose this sort of like deviant, subaltern like way of living versus when it wasn't a choice? Is that
More or less, yeah.
okay?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I love that you brought in Hellraiser. There's like a whole subset of movies that I deeply love. Hellraiser, the first two Hellraiser films, a lot of David Cronenberg's body horror work, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. I love all of these movies, but I just like couldn't really come up with a new angle on them. So I was like, other really brilliant scholars have written about all of these things as well. So I kind of left them out of the book, but they're sort of hovering around the margins, I'd like to think. Um, yeah, there's definitely this complicated dance with disability throughout the whole book. And I think part of what the text is really grappling with is like, what do you do with the difference between like self-imposed versus externally imposed sort of conditions? I think that part of what fascinates me so much about In My Skin is the fact that it is a self-imposed sort of disablement. Um, and I'm really interested in that kind of aesthetically and politically. There's a really phenomenal, although pretty controversial novel by Catherine Dunn, Geek Love, which came out in the 90s. That was really important to me when I read as a teenager. And there's a whole subplot around that, around like the whole book is about like a kind of traveling carny family who decides to create their own freaks after the cost of hiring external labor becomes too prohibitive. So there are these disabled kids who like have various relationships with their disabilities, and one of them starts a cult that causes able people to start voluntarily having amputations because of disabled fetishism. And I think that's something that's always really sort of grabbed me, just thinking about what are the connections between loving who you are and appropriating something, and what are the ways in which those lines can frequently become blurred, and how is that sort of a hatred that's imposed elsewhere as well. I don't have any easy answers to that, but I'm glad that you brought those ideas into the space, definitely.
Are there one more question? Okay. Who will rise to the challenge? Over there in the middle.
Yeah. I feel like I've talked about like what horror movies do like for you, your relationship or like of like the inner psyche, and then also that horror movies function as a sort of like couple form. If we're like watching with somebody, it sort of like creates a type, like creates a way of bonding or something. And then I'm curious about your thoughts about like what that, like about the other person, about like what, like about that person's like how a movie affects them, what that person is to you in the context of like sort of like a horror movie flowing like from you within you through each other and like vice versa.
So the question was about Zephyr's thoughts on, watching horror movies with other people and the interrelationality, if that's the right word or a word at all, between you and the movie and the other person, you and the other person, and just triangulate as hell.
Yeah, I think that that's something that I'm really fascinated by, and one of the things I really love about horror movies is that they do present these opportunities for reflection and for sort of conversation afterwards. One of the essays in the book, the one about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, is very much kind of like 3 different perspectives on a movie as sort of embodied by the people I watched it with. And I think that just given the weight of a lot of the subjects in this book, that was something that I would have liked to go into more detail throughout the whole rest of the book as well. But because of everything else I was sort of juggling, it kind of became difficult to. So maybe in Uncanny Valley Girls 2, Return to the Valley, about my inevitable move to Los Angeles, that could be something that is covered.
Going out on a limb here, do you like Los Angeles? I don't know, I'm getting this vibe. I don't know, I'm kind of psychic.
I have a complex relationship with Los Angeles, like I think everyone in the United States does.
Agreed. Well, only one way to, I don't know, if reading your book taught me anything, you guys just like dive headfirst into it. So until then, everyone give it up for Zefyr Lisowski.
Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Thank you, Zefyr and Harron, for letting us celebrate with you. If you show us in the live stream, you can buy copies of the book from the link in the description. If you're here, you can snag our final copies at the front. You can also get Blood Box and Irritated Discontent. You can also, we'll be ordering, because you bought all the books, we have to order so many more, which is so exciting. So you can also pre-order with us, and we'll let you know as soon as those come back in the store. My lovely coworkers are now pointing towards where Zefyr is going to be signing and personalizing. Not in this moment, but in just a few, we will have you line up down the center aisle to get that signing line started. Make sure to grab your belongings because we pick up those chairs as soon as you get up. But first, we're all going to be really chill. We're going to stay seated as I bring Zefyr to the back. So that's it. We're going to wait and congratulate her in the signing line. But you can go off your hair. That's too chill. But thank you all so much for joining us and have a great night.